Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episode, and this episode actually based on life extension. This is very important. Already in Asia Pacific, uh, this topic becomes very popular. So this is our second show on life extension. So we have our world famous speaker, Professor David Smith, Professor Ila, Professor Alan, Professor Rob, and Mr. Adam. And hopefully these sessions will be very, very interesting and helpful because healthcare is a major issue right now. Well, all of the government and policymakers and the corporation, they focus more on healthcare issues. So I want to start these discussions from Professor David Smith.
Sharif, thank you. This is a topic that's close and dear to I think most of us on the screen's heart right now, um, and it's a very active one. Just recently, a new company has gone public called Altos, which is a very well funded, very well backed company that is trying to really look at how to change the equation of life extension and how to put those other pieces together. It's kind of important though as you start to understand what life extension really is and the domains it works in. And then you have to talk about regenerative medicine as you talk about um, life extension to really put it in place. There's many elements of it, food, environment, all the other. But if you think about what it is, it it means that we have to look at regenerative things to repair, to heal. We need to also look at translational medicine, tissue engineering, stem cells, biofabrication, uh, and really some of the big challenges in this area involve around ethics, fairness, uh, access to these materials, and really beginning to look at the safety of them in the early days. I love one of the stories about some gene editing they did with mice. It worked 60% of the time. The other 60% of the time, it created huge cancers on the rat. So you begin to see things where you've got to take it and look at beyond the obvious and beyond where you're going with those elements of it. Um, you know, I was just in a discussion uh, in Dallas earlier this week on organ cell regeneration. And, I now can begin to regenerate and create new organs for a lot of the organs. Uh, and I think you're going to see that pick up steam quite a bit. So we're using piecemeal. But if I begin to look at some of the future elements that are really going to be there, it's ways how we look at our metabolism, which is the homeostatic process that really keeps us alive, versus the pathology, which is the really a group of anti homeostatic processes that kill us. And the the look between balancing those two elements are what's going to lead us to life extension, and it will help in every ways. But once again, life extension is an ecosystem. If I'm in an environment with heavy pollution, if I'm in an environment with not clean water, it's harder to begin to look at life extension. Even the stress of everyday living impacts life extension. And so, how do we manage all these complex systems to make it happen? And promising field, a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money is going into it today. Uh, Altos, I mentioned earlier, Jeff Bezos is their largest investor in it. And it's really there. The the research is moving there. I just wish it would move faster. So, Sharif, thank you for this time.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Professor Ila, you are one of the scholars in this life extension field, and how you want to analyze today's topic. And if you share some important issues, even the Asia Pacific, even Malaysia and other countries, they have problem with cancer, with diabetics, with many diseases. COVID also created a lot of problem. So if you give us some detailed analysis on that particular topic.
Would you like me to show a presentation? Is it okay?
Sure.
Okay. Um, and why I'm not able to share my screen? Do you see my screen? Um, do you see my screen? Do you hear me, Sharif?
We can
Hello?
hear you. We can't see your screen.
You cannot see my screen. And how do I get back? That's a great system.
Yeah, we love it.
Okay, no, again. No. And why can't I share? Oh, no. Almost. Again. Sorry. Still nothing?
No,
Okay.
And now,
you may just have to walk us through it.
yeah, that's just great. I'll use the, as they say, use the presentation tools. Now, no, it shows that I'm sharing it.
Nope.
And one more chance, and I'll just talk. Sure.
Still no. Well, there's a lot of dead air, so I think you probably should move ahead.
Yeah, maybe just one more second, and no, still no. Okay, I'll just talk a little bit. No luck today. Well, I'll just use the presentation tools that were used by Plato, as they say, and try, to raise the topic. When I talk about life extension, we obviously first of all talk about intervention into aging, into the things that shortens our lives the most. And that's the basis of geroscience. It's not such, it's easier to say than to do. When we say we want to intervene into aging, we first have to define aging. What is it that we want to intervene into? What are the measurements? What are the evaluation criteria? But at least as a general goal, that something very amorphous that we want to intervene, it's a useful goal to intervene into aging, to postpone multiple age-related diseases, and of course it is very important for the public health, and it should really be a public health priority, as Sharif mentioned, because it is of course possible to go after every single disease and after every single symptom, but if we go after the main root cause of most age-related chronic diseases, which is the aging process, we will probably be able to achieve greater effects. And there are actually calculations that by extended healthy life, healthy longevity by 1 year, we'll be able to save hundreds of billions of dollars just in the US, probably trillions in the world. Unfortunately, it is not on the public health agenda. People still prefer this silo approach to go after particular diseases, so one at a time. But hopefully, the more holistic approach will be implemented in time. And of course, I cannot go into details what type of research are currently being done. There is now quite a wide assortment of interventions that were shown to be effective in animal models to extend healthy life in animal models. But now our task as activists is, as the researchers, to move the studies to the clinical phase Of course, there is, David mentioned there are now commercial investments, but I believe we shouldn't leave it all to commercial enterprise. We should develop the public investments, public entitlements as well. And that's also what we do as activists. As you probably know, I'm an activist in International Longevity Alliance, also here in Israel in the VETIC Association, the Movement for Longevity and Quality of Life. And we try to raise this agenda everywhere. So we really need this preventive approach to intervene into aging, to extend healthy life on all levels. So I don't know if it was just a brief summary of what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Professor. Professor Allen. So we are discussing about life extension. So from your perspective, if you share some views, and definitely in Asia Pacific, after the discussion with Professor Ila, we try to engage with different policymaker, different research institute. This is very important. Actually, how USA, different organization, they are thinking about these life extensions, and what is your advice?
My expertise isn't specifically have to do with life extension in terms of biology, but the to the extent that I'm interested in life extension of the human race. That I think nuclear is a definite threat. Both nuclear power and nuclear war are related. There's always an attempt to say nuclear power doesn't have anything to do with nuclear arms, but it definitely does. Its origin is in nuclear power, and so our concept is that we need to get rid of nuclear power as well as nuclear weapons. They can't be separated. It's not possible. And people who think it is, that they need to read a little more on the real experts of nuclear weapons, and they will tell you that you can't separate them. As far as specific kind of biological things for life extension, we are in favor of replacing all non-renewable energy. That includes, of course, nuclear, but fossil fuels, these relate to a particulate matter in the atmosphere that cause disease, and so we're looking for a clean environment, clean water, clean air, and purely renewable energy. And we're on the way. We have made great progress. In fact, in California, it's now the law. It will be done. Some people are skeptical about whether you can do renewable energy for everything, and we are doing it by law. It will be done, and we have the engineering capability, and we know about all the resources that are available for renewable energy, and it will happen. It will happen, and we're going to get rid of all non-renewable energy, and that itself will lend itself to the quality of life. And when you talk about life extension, I'm more interested in the quality of life for people in advanced age, and for preventing a lot of the disease we see is preventable. So I hope to live to be 100, but that I don't think that's not a goal of mine to live forever. Not at all, because we need to let future generations have a chance. But we should be leaving the planet in a state that they can enjoy all the benefits that we have now, and that we could have if we manage things correctly.
Thank you, Professor. Professor Rob.
Well, extending life is certainly fascinating. We as a race, we've been talking about this for hundreds of years. Even explored the world looking for the fountain of youth. The problem with coming up with age extending technology is the amount of testing time that you need. The fact is you're going to apply a drug that's going to extend your life out the back end, who knows how much, and that means you kind of have to apply the drug early in life to an individual, and then see if it extends out the back end, extending the testing process, to multiple decades, which has been problematic. The most effective methodology that's been found is caloric restriction. That's not starvation. It's restricting your calories. You still get the basics of vitamins, minerals, etc., but you minimize your caloric intake. And what that does is it reduces the number of times your cells multiply, and it's that cellular multiplication that causes aging. Now that sounds great, because now that we're my age, we can now put ourselves on a caloric restrictive diet and hopefully live longer. Sadly, it doesn't work that way. CR works if you start it when you're really young. In midlife, it has nominal effect, and when you're my age, it has no effect whatsoever. So the only effective methodology we found so far to extend life is one that you have to begin largely by the time you figure you want to extend your life. So that's not really working. One of the hopeful possibilities in being able to do testing, because you think, given the fact that we all die, that most pharmaceutical companies would be working on this problem, but they're not. And the reason is they say the testing is just horrendous. We've got to figure out a way to do the testing so you can complete a test sequence in a relatively short period of time. Now, we can do it. Clearly, we're doing it with mice, and because the mice's life cycle is far more rapid than ours. And so when we do experimentation on mice, we do get a sense that that might work on mice, but mice are not 100% generically similar to us. And in fact, the research on long-lived turtles came back and indicated, yes, you could have the life of a turtle, but you'd have to become a turtle. It goes to how the biological mechanism was designed, and it's not easy to do something like, say, take a pill and extend the life. You have to restructure the biological entity, which has been problematic. So the hope is we're going to be able to come up with something like a human digital twin that is highly accurate, run the experimentation against that digital twin, which has a life expectancy tied to computer cycles. We do this all the time with equipment, where we can say, for instance, with an autonomous car, we can do 100 years of testing in a few hours, because we're testing at computer speeds. We're not testing at real-time speeds. But as I've noted, emulating the human body has proven problematic, because we have so many systems that are interrelated. Just creating a digital twin of a human that you could do do medical testing on is proven problematic in and of itself. So our biggest problem in extending human life is the one method that seems to work. You have to start before somebody's typically willing to start it, and the testing methodology you need to go through to validate the anti-aging claims is so lengthy that it just hasn't been attractive at scale. And you really need to do this at scale to do it real time to the pharmaceutical companies that might be willing to produce a solution. So that's the problem we've got. On top of that, of course, we've got geopolitical problems of what would happen if we suddenly were able to extend life, and because you now get a bunch of people that are older and retired that society has to support, which can be problematic as well. Life extension would undoubtedly have to come hand in hand with a reevaluation of retirement ages and retirement level medical programs that have to be in place to cover people who are no longer working but are living a long time. Oh, and then finally, you want to prolong life. You don't want to prolong death. The other issue is a misapplication of this technology could mean you're living, your 90s indefinitely, and nobody really wants to do that either. I mean, when we think about life extension, we're thinking about, we want to live a longer, healthier life. We don't want to prolong the time in our life when we're partially disabled and going through major medical traumas on a regular basis. So it's a complex category, and hopefully we'll eventually wrap our arms around it. But I think the most promising is being able to do it through digital emulation and human digital twins.
Thank you. Thank you. We have our new friend, Mr. Nicholas. Can you share your views about life extension?
Yes. First of all, I'm sorry for the delay. I think with this whole world communication, we never know which is the exact time. I thought it would begin 2 hours later. So, well, um, I think about life extension that we are in a very special moment in history because the basic science is starting to understand aging, is starting to understand aging. Uh, but at the same time, this presents a problem because it's clear that the basic science is still the should be the focus because um, for example, there is not a minimum consensus about if aging is a programmed phenomenon or if aging is um, just the deterioration of the body, like the accumulation of damage. And this is very important because you can say, if it's only the accumulation of damage, we just have to replace the damaged parts and we can live indefinitely. However, if aging is a programmed phenomenon, you can't replace an old part of the body or an old cell, an old organ for a new one, and the old body can make this new piece to behave like an old piece. So it is important to clarify the basic science about the nature of aging before we can implement effectively life extension or even rejuvenation therapies. So nowadays, there are some experiments showing that, for example, senolytics can eliminate the senescent cells and extend the life of animal models, and probably other therapies regarding the accumulation of damage approach can extend life of humans as well and other animal models. However, there are other set of experiments that show that therapies based on the programmed aging, using, for example, the Yamanaka factors, using partial cellular reprogramming, or using other techniques. For example, recently, Harold Katcher was able to reverse aging in mice in 54% in an epigenetic measurement. And these kind of procedures are more linked to the programmed theory of aging. So I think that nowadays that we need to focus on the basic science and to clarify once for all what is the real nature of aging, if it's a programmed phenomenon or not. Because if it's a programmed phenomenon, it could be not so useful to insist in the damage repair approach. So this is the question in this moment, in my opinion, and we need to look to the experimental results instead of just debating hypothetical theories. We have to look at the experimental results and to take a conclusion as soon as possible in order we can focus on the right basic science path.
All right, Sharif has vanished into the ether. We're moving to David. Oh no, Sir Adam, Mr. Adam. Adam, you're next.
Thank you, Rob. Well, the whole life extension topic was pretty much one of my earliest gateways that introduced me to transhumanism, and it is certainly something that really struck a chord with me. I can safely say that I would not like to die for as long as possible if I can help it. For me, it's something I find deeply compelling through a more philosophical lens or an ethical lens or moralistic lens. So I wonder whether or not I already feared death more or less compared to after I first learned about life extension. Maybe I didn't fear it too much until I started reading about life extension, where the act of shining a light on it just brings it more to the forefront, where it would just stay there and wouldn't budge, and then I can't stop thinking about it. Or maybe I did fear death before, and then discovering the promising ideas about life extension helped to soothe my fear of death because it seemed like I could still be alive to enjoy the benefits. Or maybe I feared it equally both before and after this discovery. This was about 15 years ago, back when I first got into it all, so I can't remember exactly, but I must admit I do have lots of anxiety and apprehension towards death and when. One thing I fear more than death itself is how I am going to die. Will I be suffering greatly or not? Will it be quick and over in a merciful flash? Or will it be prolonged and stretched out in a torturous fashion? Within transhumanism and futurism, life extension and the abolition of suffering are one of the two big ideas alongside several others. But I fear a terrible death rather than death itself. So that is why, as a futurist myself, the abolition of suffering, or its radical minimalization at least, is slightly more of a priority for me personally than life extension. Although I am an advocate of both, and I myself would love to enjoy both of these for myself as well as for others. But of course, through another perspective, we could see that all these issues are interconnected, and progress within one will be useful and have lots of transferable benefits that will help progress to be made in other endeavors. And all of these futurist visions are all encompassing. The issue of suffering and curing death is something that could give us all hope. And of course, we all have a personal stake in the vision of life extension because we all have family members who are elderly and unwell. We all have family members who are very old but have learned so much and gained so much wisdom. Of course, firstly, you cannot put an old head on young shoulders. And secondly, life is too short to reap the benefits of all the elderly wisdom gathered over 60, 70, 80, 90 years, especially. Well, what I mean is, say we have a family member who is in their 90s and they pass away at 90 years old, they still would have had much left to teach us. And by the same token, I'm sure many people, when they reach 80 or 90, realize that there is still so much left to learn, still an abundance of places left to visit, new musical instruments to play, new languages to learn. And yet, even 90 years or 100 years is still not enough to, and by the time a person reaches that kind of age and then dies, they are still just grains of sand in a massive beach, metaphorically, where that beach is a representation of potentiality that people with a whole lifespan still did not have time to enjoy, unfortunately, until the emergence of life extension technologies and therapeutics. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, I have a question because let's say World Talent Economy Forum, we are actually working with many developing nations. They have different healthcare related challenge. Your organization also supporting many developing nations. But my question is that life extension, definitely it's a visionary project. It's need a lot of investment. And yes, different billionaires and the richest people, they are investing on it. But do you believe that this kind of tech like research is also helpful for developing nations and it will give them the new hope and new opportunity?
I do. The research in this area is, as we mentioned earlier, is very expensive as you look at how to move it from science to commercialization. And it's moving to commercialization where the majority of that cost is expended, really. The basic research in it, though, can be very broad. Part of the research could be how do I look at foods that can help extend life? How do I begin to look at ways to affect the environment that might help extend life? So many of the things we've talked about in some of the other broadcasts with you actually play well when I start looking at life extension, because life extension is such a broad area that a lot can be done with it and a lot can be put in place. The other thing as you begin to look at life extension is the ability to look across different things. I mean, anti-aging drugs, nanotechnology, cloning, regrowing regenerative healthcare. Uh, Cryogenics is one of the things that was really popular for a while as a way to do it. Genetic, the digital twins, the ability to upload minds. You see just so many places. There's controversials on whether I can uh, take younger individuals, take their blood, and inject the blood to help extend life. Uh, so many different areas. It's a wide field with many possibilities. But once again, the challenge for particularly developing nations is pulling in the cash to take the invention from the scientific domain to a commercial marketplace. And the lead lag relationship between that to make sure you're in compliance with regulatory concerns, both from a scientific regulatory concerns, a health regulatory concern, and just the political environments are also have to be taken in hand as you do research and life extension and move it from the research to the commercialization.
Thank you, Professor Ila.
Yes, definitely. It is a very important topic also for developing nations, for everybody. And it is a great mistake to think that aging only affects the developed nations. Actually, in absolute terms, it is much more impactful in the developing nations. Also, they are aging more rapidly, while the developed nations basically reach the plateau. The developing the nations are leaping forward toward population aging, while at the same time their research and treatment infrastructure is underdeveloped. That's a bit danger. On the one hand, you have an aging population. On the other hand, you don't have the infrastructure to deal with it. So definitely a very urgent issue for the developed countries, for the developing countries, and anything that can be dedicated, any resources that can be dedicated to it are very important. Right now, as far as I understand, it is not even on the agenda. It's not raised. There are no courses, at least in most of the developing countries. Even in the developed countries, it's often not in the university curriculum. But if the means are very limited, probably the good place to start is from education, to raise awareness about the importance of the aging issues, about the science of life extension. That doesn't cost a lot, but you can raise a new generation of talent, a new generation of thinkers and doers in the aging field. So that's what would probably give most bang for the buck. But anything that you can develop, really, as David said, that is very broad field. You can develop biomarkers, you can develop evaluation criteria, you can develop specific geroprotective therapies, even in the nutrition level or the drug level, all kinds of things that you can develop with any means that are available. What doesn't make any sense is not to invest in this area at all in the developing nations, particularly just to think that it's not there, it doesn't concern us. That's absolutely irrational. It does concern the developing countries. So we need to invest in it. So even 1% from the country research budget would go a long way. And also strengthening cooperation. Obviously, the most research has been done in the developed countries. So the way to advance is to adopt the best practices, to take as much as possible from the developed countries and instill it in your own territory.
Thank you. Professor Allen. Unmute, please.
I said I don't have anything to add, but I'm interested in what Rob said about calorie restriction. And is there a source? I mean, I had the impression that calorie restriction would be beneficial at all ages, but he seems to say that it needs to be something that's implemented at an early age. I wonder if he can elaborate on that, or is there some sort of resource that you have on that?
Thank you.
Sure. I put in the chat the resource. Let's see. It's give you the reference from the Milbank Quarterly. Extending Life: Scientific Prospects and Political Obstacles is the article. It's from the U.S. National Laboratory of Melbourne. Sorry, Milbank. So anyway, back to where I am now. Talking about digital clones, or digital twins for research, and and there actually is a company that has done work on this. CIOX has connected a large number of health research organizations into. This is an article on aging. It mostly focuses, at least as a remedy, on caloric restriction, which is the CR in the article. And then it talks about all much of the other research that's going into this area and how it would impact the human longevity. It's a very well written article and fairly thorough. But back to digital clones, or digital twins, human digital twins. If we can get to that particular point, then we can do a lot of this research at machine speeds, and we're much more likely to come to a timely conclusion. If you look at how kids coming out of college are positioned against types of research, doing research on aging, they're discouraged from doing it. And the reason is because the trials are so long. If you want to advance in biological research, you want to work in areas where your trials are relatively short, because then you can do more of them and you're more likely to have a breakthrough. And of course, it's that breakthrough that gives you the credit that you're going to need to advance your career. If you're just doing research and you're not putting out any results, you're not going to rise above the crowd. So the idea is, if you want to go into an area where that research is actually going to result in something, and sadly, research into aging, clearly a lot of people are doing it, but I'm just saying it's not popular because of the amount of time it takes to do that research and come up with a viable drug or practice or routine or technology. Some of the other things that are being explored with regard to life extension, head transplants. That work is ongoing. The idea that you can take an older person's body, put it on somebody that's had an accident, brain dead, or cloned, and then continue your life is being looked at. Most of the neurosurgeons, though, agree that we're not where we need to be on the science yet, though, to make it viable near term. Severing and reconnecting the spinal cord is just something that's beyond us at the moment. So that's not really viable. And then, of course, if you recognize a lot of the conditions of aging, Alzheimer's, mental decline, would not be affected by this at all. Cloning in and of itself was an idea to extend life. You clone somebody. We clearly are able to clone animals. But as people that have paid those incredible fees to have their animal cloned have discovered, you don't really get your animal back. You get an animal that looks like your pet, but it doesn't have the teachings that your pet has. It doesn't know who you are. It doesn't. If you've trained the pet, none of the training's there. So you get a biological clone, but the things that make that pet your pet aren't in the pet. You might as well have a stuffed example of the animal, and you probably get closer to your pet just by getting another pet and training it the same way you did your own. So that really isn't viable for life extension until we can actually figure out how to transfer consciousness. And it's that consciousness transfer that looks to be the most promising, at least an element of it appears to be the most promising near term. And that's creating a digital clone of you, digital immortality. And that, at least in theory, we can do. The thing is what it would be is an emulation of you. So it would be a digital clone that could behave like you do, could look in the ether, in the metaverse like you, but it still wouldn't be you. But in the end, if you think about it, you're not really you now anyway. The cellular replacement in our bodies is relatively aggressive, and the you that existed when you were a child is not at all the you that exists when you're older. Your cellular structure has largely been replaced. You are a different person, and a lot of people argue that our continuity isn't continuity at all. It's a perception. We perceive that we've had a life, and that from childhood to adulthood we're the same person, but we're really not. We're different people over a period of time as our cellular makeup is replaced by other cells, and we are largely replaced by the time that we're older, and so we may feel like we've extended our life from childhood to adulthood, but we may not have. It's just something that our brain has fabricated to keep things together. So in the end, we're for longevity on humans, we are very reliant on a testing process being developed, the possibility of creating a digital twin of a human so that we can do the testing on it, and then perhaps using similar technology to allow us to take our personality, our behaviors, and of course freeze our appearance in a virtual world environment, a matrix-like environment. But we're still short of figuring out what it is that makes us us, and transferring that into a body that could have unlimited life. Because most of the research, if you dig through it, does indicate that it may be impossible to take our existing bodies and significantly extend the life of them because of the way that they were designed. And the only way to make that change is a fundamental redesign of the bodies. And at some point, that means we're going to have to transfer our essence, our soul, or whatever it is you want to talk about that defines us into that alternative structure. And it's that transfer that we're kind of boggled on, because we don't even really know what makes us us. And until we define that, it's going to be really hard to figure out how to transfer it from one container to another. So that's kind of the mess. It sounds like digital longevity, digital immortality would be a relatively easy problem to solve. It's proven to be incredibly difficult because of the complex nature of humans and our inability to define to any definitive case what makes us us. And that would be the part that we would need to transfer into either a digital mechanism, a clone, an artificial body, or a donor to make immortality, extreme life extension work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your excellent analysis, Mr. Nicholas.
Sharif, can you repeat the question of this round, because I forgot?
Okay. Yes, I understand. Basically, my question is that, okay, for this longevity and life extension related research is good for developed nations, but do you believe that this kind of research and this kind of things is helpful for these developing nations? And if it's helpful, how it will work for them?
First of all, this concept of developed nations and developing nations is a very tricky debate, because a lot of developing nations were suffered coup of state organized by the developed nations. So which is the developed nation and the developing nation? I don't know. So first of all, these concepts are a little tricky. But beyond that, the life expectancy in the whole world, in all countries, it's indicates that people, the most common cause of death of the people in whole countries basically is aging, age-related diseases. So the average age of death is more than 60 years old in practically all continents except for Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. But even there, even in those countries, aging is still the bigger killer because the average age of death is more than 50 years old. So uh, I think we have to understand from what are the causes of death in a percentual way in all countries. And if you do that in any country, you see that cancer or heart attack or cardiovascular diseases or diabetes are the biggest killers. So the, of course, some countries have more percentage of cancer and cardiovascular diseases, but even the countries in which the cause of death are less related to aging. Even so, the aging is the biggest killer. You can go to, I mean, India, South East Asia, Latin America, Central America. You see that aging is the greatest killer. So I'm sure that all human aggregation in the world should emphasize the research on aging and to try to implement as soon as possible the rejuvenation therapies in order to avoid people reach the point of deterioration in which diabetes, cancer, osteoporosis, cardiovascular diseases, and frailty or immunosenescence, because people die like from pneumonia or a virus, and people say they died from the virus, but if if they hadn't immunosenescence, if their immune system wasn't old and deteriorated, they wouldn't die. So, what was the real and most important cause of that? A virus of immunosenescence. Well, I think the age-related diseases are more broadly that what today we agree, like cardiovascular disease or cancer. I mean, frailty and immunosenescence are big problems in aging. So we should solve those problems, and this affects absolutely all countries in the world in a very, very strong way.
Thank you. Mr. Adam.
Thank you, Sharif. When Rob was speaking, something he said reminded me and inspired me to think that life extension should have a double-pronged strategy where, as well as extending biological lifespans radically, indefinitely, we want to do that coupled with engineering high enough life qualities and standards of happiness that it would, meaning that it would be worth our while to battle through all the roadblocks and dead ends in life extension. It will happen eventually, but we want to make sure that our descendants are happy enough, motivated enough, that their life is meaningful enough to make overcoming the challenges more worthwhile. We don't want people to flounder in centuries-long depression, of course. One of the most frustrating rebuttals I hear when people critique life extension is, "Wouldn't you get bored?" I don't know how anyone could think that there is not enough things left to discover, experience, overcome, thus risking boredom. And maybe that says more about the person saying such things rather than what immortalists are trying to achieve. And again, when people critique this kind of endeavor, I think people think they conflate extreme life extension, immortality, immortalism with the more mundane type of life extension that is closer to home, looking into extending lifespans to 200, 300, 400 years, which is more achievable, is sooner in terms of achievability with near future timelines and forecasts, and not so far flung into the extreme future, hundreds of millennia from now. Of course, they are both related, but I think people need to remember that these are two obviously related, but still distinct enough endeavors. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you. Thank you. This is really great sessions and great discussions. Even, sorry, there is a noise. Uh, so definitely it will be very helpful, definitely helpful. But yes, I'm from developing nations. I just want to share that uh, maybe our corporation, our government, our academy, they have to invest more money for research. Yes, life extension is one of the important things. But from my personal experience, I saw that my grandfather from my mother's side, grandmother from my father's side, they actually get long lives, around 100 years. And I try to understand what they actually do. Yes, basically, if you see in the South Asia, still they have to improve their healthcare system, healthcare policy and everything. But what I understand, that they were very hardworking, they were very disciplined, they were very, yes, one of the important thing for Asia, I want to share that family is very important. Family environment and cultures actually give them some mental peace. They practice religion, this is also give them some mental peace. And beside that, I think good food also important. But day by day, uh, developing nations, when they heavily dependent on different corporations and different things, I think fresh food is one of the challenges right now. Fresh and healthy food, organic food is another major challenges right now. And population actually increasing, so country do not have option, they have to they cannot maintain the organic process. But what I see from my grandfather or from my grandmothers, they are actually managing this organic food. Even I can remember my house was actually very big, it's more than 1 acres. And my grandmother tried to produce everything in house, like even we get milk from cow, we get egg from chickens, we get food, fresh vegetables, fish, everything. So maybe I don't know, but you are the scientist, and maybe this is another thing. But how actually population is increasing at that time, actually our farmers and everyone, they have to dependent on that things. And beside that, I want to say the developing nations, because many countries still they do not have health insurance policy, still they have lot of challenges. And developed nations actually are producing many scientific issues, and they have lot of technology, they have lot of even innovations. So I request everyone, you should share your innovation, your research work and everything with the developing nations, and collaboratively we can work. Actually, there are many corporations, I still believe still they do not know what is the benefit of investing in research in developing nations. I know thousands of corporations, they are capables, but they do not know that why this investing in research is important. So as you are scholars, maybe World Talent Economy Forum, on behalf of you, we can convince these corporations, we can convince governments. I'm very happy, even our government, they are actually providing us, as we are developing startup village concept, a island, a big island we are getting. And hopefully we can develop a research hub, and we can collaborate with global corporations, and we can bringing more science and technological issues, and we can share these things with the developing nation. Maybe this is one of the strategy, but definitely we need lot more collaborations. We need open learning methods. Even World Talent Economy Forum, we want to share like micro courses. So if any of our scholars want to share your content with the university students what we have. So we are ready to share your content. So in any point, if you have a research related activities or academic activities, as well as you want to arrange more conference, we are happy to do that, because global collaboration is very important. And I believe still there is a millions of people in untouched. We have to touch them and we have to improve their life. So thank you everyone. It's really great discussion, and I'm sure it's really helpful for our audience. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. I want to start from Professor David Smith. Yes.
Thank you so much, Sharif. During this century, we will see life expectancies dramatically increase. Multiple people are saying that the first people to live over 150 years have already been born and are working and live. At the recent RADFest, there was mention in some of the talks that they believe children born in the next decade will begin to live over 200 years old. So there's a lot of promise on the horizon, but there's also a lot of research that needs to be done. You need to look at the pros and the cons of life extension. I love the fact that we can grow older, but also, as was said earlier, what do we do with the younger people? How do we keep them in jobs? How do we sustain this with food? How do we sustain it with healthcare? And how do we put those elements together? I believe science is on the path to make a profound impact. I know we recognize many of the environmental considerations. We've talked a lot about them in these casts. We need to make progress there. But I, for one, hope I'm a benefit of some of the science of life extension as we go forward. So, Sharif, thank you.
Thank you. Professor Ila.
Yes, thanks once again. To reiterate what was said earlier, we need more discussion of this. The issue is very important, and not enough justice is given to it in terms of consultation, in terms of investment, in terms of research. So we need to have more discussion, more education, more investment. The more the better. But anything that is feasible will be welcome. What doesn't make any sense is not to discuss it at all, not to invest in it at all. But starting from a certain minimal point, we can only advance. But we need to establish some baseline. And thanks to such discussions, this one, I hope this baseline will be established in Malaysia and elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Professor. Professor Allen. Okay, Professor Rob.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting area, of course. But what do they say? That the two things you can't avoid are death and taxes. And so, and particularly the older you get, that you either get to the point where you're much more concerned about extending your life expectancy, or depending on your health, you may be thinking, "Hey, I've already lived long enough; it's time to go." But life extension does give you that potential choice. The using this as a business mechanism, there are actually a number of companies that are working on life extensions, and clearly medical tourism is an economic thing. If you were able to develop programs that would extend life, it can be lucrative. It can be very lucrative in terms of a medical tourism kind of a model. But for most, the emerging economies have other problems that probably have a higher priority that have to do with the quality of life. And I would say in terms of priority of execution, we probably should focus on quality of life before we talk about life extension, because life extension without improving quality of life would likely degrade it. You put a lot more people into an ecosystem that already has high unemployment, and you're going to make that ecosystem sicker. And so you do have to look at this holistically and recognize that while life extension is certainly very important from a geopolitical area, concept or a position, it could be far more damaging. You don't want to make major changes into a population without understanding what those major changes are going to do. There's also the problem with inequity. Early life extension programs are likely going to favor the rich. They're going to be expensive. If you look at some of the stuff that's been messed with, like using young blood to extend life, which, by the way, nobody should be doing because there's no proof that stuff works. And there are huge issues with regard to abusing children as a result of this treatment. You can certainly see that the way to generate cash in this environment is very pronounced. There are given we have no other than a caloric restriction, we don't really have a mechanism that's been scientifically proven to extend life. That there are a lot of companies selling life extension products. Arguably, none of them work, and so there's a huge area for fraud and criminal activity in this space. Where I was a moment ago is the inequity in the treatments. If a treatment's become available, but they're only available to the people that are very rich, that's going to create a lot of hatred towards the wealthy and create economic and political disruption. So this is one of the things that has to be dealt with very carefully because it affects everybody. Approaching it in isolation would be problematic. You would have to look at what the procedure does geopolitically. You need to look at what it does to inequity in the country, and you have to make sure that what you're doing is not only making life longer and better for the individual, but preserving the geopolitical structure, or at least not degrading the geopolitical structure significantly, so that lives are being ended through war and conflict, as opposed to aging, because dead is dead. And of course, personally, if I have a choice between dying in my sleep and being shot, I'll take dying in my sleep any day of the week. So really thinking about the broader implications of this are important. And I do think the focus, rather than on life extension, should at least initially in an emerging economy being on improving life in general. The procedures to address why people may not want to live would be more important. Dealing with crippling diseases, dealing with mutations, dealing with injuries that are catastrophic. Another more interesting market is prosthetics, because we have in emerging economies, we often have people that have lost a limb or been significantly injured, and they can't afford the corrective surgery or the prosthetics that they need to fix the problem, and they're out of the workforce, and so their quality of life is going to be pretty horrid throughout. And fixing those kinds of problems would probably should have a higher priority than longevity at first, because those are the ones that are more prevalent. If you can extend the quality of life, improve the quality of life, and extend that quality of life, then you're at a point where life extension in and of itself becomes valuable, and you'll probably be doing more good than harm. If you don't do it in that order, you may in fact do more harm than good.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Adam.
Sorry about that, my computer just froze. When you were discussing family, Sharif, it got me thinking about a death in my family recently. He was suffering, he had dementia, so he was suffering quite badly. So it was a relief for both of us, his family, having to witness this decline, and it was a relief for him too, being the sufferer. So our relationship with death is very complicated. I don't want to die. I don't want my loved ones and close friends to die ever. It's a subject that makes me feel very melancholic, but death is still a release for some people going through terrible pain. So a relationship with death is complex and nuanced, and you can want to live for an extended period of time without wanting to be immortal, where you might finally think, yeah, it's time to go when you hit 1,000. But I would certainly like the option to live, well, way beyond that, of course. But I echo what Mr. Rob said about not overlooking the importance of engineering high enough life quality whilst busy with trying to solve the problem of aging. Thanks, Sharif. It's a good subject.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholas.
Oh, thanks, Sharif, for organizing this, and thanks for everybody here. Uh, well, I think that there is a bipolar behavior. I mean, in the whole history of humanity, people tried to sell things to extend life or rejuvenate. And now that science is really understanding the basic process of science, we can't go to the other extreme and think that we already know what scientifically cause aging and start doing the same, making products and companies and trying to sell again. Of course, it's necessary to take the scientific discoveries and bring them to the market, of course. But I'm a little worried about the basic science because there are serious doubts regarding the basic science in the life extension field or rejuvenation field, and we need to keep an eye on the, as I mentioned earlier, in the practical results, and because today that nowadays there is a very interesting theory about the programmed aging based on the discoveries of Steve Horvath regarding a common characteristic in the epigenetic of practically all mammalian species that indicates that the same epigenetic change occurs in all mammalian species in a pattern. So there is no random damages in the epigenetic aging. So are very consistent damage. So if it's the case, we could reverse aging, reversing the epigenetic changes. And if these epigenetic changes are the same in all mammalian species, maybe what works for one species can work for another species, for other species, and this can solve a big problem in the scientific industry regarding that some things work for rats and don't work for humans. But a technology that could cross species could speed up a lot the rejuvenation, the arrival of the rejuvenation therapies. So I would call the attention to this question about basic science and the opposition between programmed aging and non-programmed aging, and that we need to solve this problem before advance, because maybe it's too much capital wasted and scientific effort wasted if it's put in the wrong theoretical structure.
Thank you. This is an excellent discussion, and I'm sure it will be very helpful for academy. And beside that, I request the corporations and governments, and regularly we share our content with you as well as different universities. I request please invest on research, and definitely we are discuss about cutting edge technology, modern science, and many important things. So I'm sure our professors as well as our mentor, our board of advisor, they are very happy to help. So those who want to do collaborations and need more guideline, you directly can communicate with our speakers as well as you directly communicate with World Talent Economy Forum. Hopefully we can create better collaborations and we can develop a better world with all kind of good research and good technology, and definitely life extension is important for us. Thank you, Professor David Smith, Professor Ila, Professor Rob, Mr. Adam, and Mr. Nicholas for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. Bye bye and take care.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Best.
Thank you.